Hello and welcome. The cadence for this practice will be breathwork, warm up, and then the first yin posture will be Sphinx pose. And then both sides of a lateral bend in Dragonfly pose. Happy baby pose, both sides of sleeping swan. Another round of Sphinx, and then finally resting pose. You can manage the whole practice without any props, but props might be useful, particularly a bolster and or a block, and any other kind of soft padding like blankets or pillows. The theme for this practice will be the Tropic of Cancer. The practice starts by finding a stable seat. For this practice, I'm going to recommend sitting back on one's heels, but if that's not an option for you, then find another comfortable seat. So you'll sit back, just feet together, knees together. For some people, this is okay. For others, this is not going to happen. So maybe you sit cross-legged or some other way here. This is one name for this is Seiza pose, and another name for it is Vajrasana. And so if you can sit comfortably this way, then maybe try it here. And then invite yourself into your practice. That means noticing your breath, your inhales, your exhales, not really changing your breath, but noticing some internal processes like your breath. Maybe you're someone who can actually feel your circulation. We can feel the temperature of your skin. Notice the feelings of emotions and mental processes going on. In other words, notice your current state of being and even external environmental factors like sound that's around you, air temperature, anything else that might be going on. Just be present with the current moment, whenever that might be here. So a few more just normal breaths here, and then we'll do a couple of energy gathering breaths. So maybe on your next exhale, exhale out, and then when you inhale, a nice slow inhale and make a big sweeping circle with your extended arms from the ground all the way up overhead until your hands kind of reach each other at the end of the exhale or inhale. And then exhale and kind of let the hands settle in front of your torso, down kind of at your low torso here. And so another breath. So inhale, gather the energy from the outside world. Exhale and let it settle and gather your low abdomen here. So a couple more cycles. Inhale and exhale. So kind of expansive breaths here. And then just return to your normal natural breath. One warm-up exercise before we get into the real long-held postures, and that is a toe squat and a shoulder opener. So for the toe squat, here's some options. First, just come to hands and knees. Tuck your toes under, and then maybe just shift back until you're feeling a lot of nice, lovely pressure in the feet and in the toes, in the feet. And if it's a lot of pressure, maybe that's all you can do. So you just stay there for a few breaths. Some of us might be able to sit up back on the toes here. And again, you're gauging how intense this is. My pinky toe is rebelling, so I have to kind of adjust it here. There. So you can just stay here, or you can add a shoulder opener while you're doing this. Keep track of how your feet are feeling, and if this is too intense, then undo the feet, and it might be already too intense here. Otherwise, we'll combine eagle arms with this toe squat here. So arms come out wide, extend your arms long, and then cross the arms above the elbows. So maybe the right elbow underneath the left elbow. And then make your version of eagle arms. So you bend at the elbow. Maybe you just find your upper arms or shoulders with your hands. Maybe you can continue to twist and maybe you can catch fingers. And then some of you might be able to make kind of a little bit of prayer hands here. Move the elbows slightly forward and up until you're feeling some oomph in the back of your torso. The shoulders, kind of feel the shoulder pressure here. And then just hold this for a breath or so. And then release, maybe shake it out. Arms go out wide. And now cross the arms again, other way. So now it's the right arm on top, the left arm on the bottom. And then again, find your version of eagle arms here. And then elbows slightly forward and up. Maybe they don't go anywhere until you're feeling lovely pressure in the back of your torso here. So spine is neutral. There's a slight toning in the core, so everything feels stable here. How are your feet doing? And then go ahead and release. And you can slowly release your feet, and you can kind of just tap your feet out. And that's it for the warm-up. We'll start the first long-held yin posture. We'll hold, and it'll be Sphinx pose. We'll stay here for maybe a little over 3 minutes or so. So come to lie on your belly, legs comfortably extended out behind you here. Feet as close or as far apart as you need them. And then bring your elbows underneath your shoulders, roughly shoulder width apart, although you'll have to make little minor adjustments to make sure you can bone stack your upper arm bones so that your muscles in your arms can be as soft as possible. And then relax your torso muscles, let your spine sag to create a back bend, to create a light compression in the mid to low spine. And for some people this is a bit too much, so you can always just welcome yourself down onto your belly. This might be enough of a back bend for you. However, I will recommend for people with supple spines, maybe just stay here. We're actually going to do Sphinx twice in this practice. And so I'll give you a deeper option on the second version of Sphinx. But for now, maybe just be satisfied with normal Sphinx, even though there might be very little sensation and it feels more like a restorative posture. Just notice your breathing, send your breath in, allow your breath to just relax the muscles in your torso so that the bones of your spine really are sagging and lightly compressing together. Not that there's pain, but just that you feel this light stopping point here. And then we'll stay here for a couple more minutes or so. So I'll go through the principles of practice, the 3 basic principles here for yin. The first one is called finding your edge. And that concept is important. Now you're trying to find your edge, not my edge. You're trying to find your edge for today as opposed to yesterday or what it might be tomorrow. And your edge is that place where your body stops. You've found the extent of your range of motion today. And you're noticing that through the resistance, through the slight pressure that you're feeling, through some kind of light stress or traction. But it's not creating injury. If that's the case, then you have passed your edge. So you need to back off here a little bit or so. But here we're kind of taking it easy in Sphinx for a little more than another minute or so. Second principle is called stillness. We stay here for a bit. We cultivate the sense of patience and fortitude. Like this is high priority. This is important. So we're not jumping in and out of the posture because we get bored with it. We're trying to stay focused. This is why it's a yoga practice, is we're cultivating attention and focus to stay here. And then finally, that's the time elements that brings the benefits, the mental benefits a lot of times, and also some small physical benefits, particularly to things like our connective tissue. Maybe maybe other systems, even like digestive systems here. So maybe 3 or 4 more breaths here in Sphinx. So this yoga video is being recorded at a location in the Northern Hemisphere on the day of the June Solstice, so the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. And that's sort of related to this topic that I mentioned, which is actually a latitude line on the Earth here called the Tropic of Cancer. It's, if you have any kind of a standard globe, you've ever looked at the lines, the latitude and longitude lines on a globe of the Earth, often you'll see these 2 lines above and below the equator, the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. And the Tropic of Cancer is directly related to the June solstice here. So we'll slowly come out of Sphinx. You can just slowly lower yourself all the way to the ground and maybe stay here for a while to let your spine rebound if you're feeling a very strong rebound from that Sphinx pose here. Otherwise, feel like a little bit of movement feels good. You can move yourself back into child's pose here. And then just maybe stay here for a few breaths. In child's pose, this is counter maneuvers. Or you can get really active and you can bring yourself up into the yawn posture of downward facing dog. Make sure your hands and feet are well rooted. And then try to extend your arms, extend your legs as much as possible, and try to bring your spine to a nice neutral position. There's some toning in the core here. We can do something else for a few breaths. But we'll go ahead and set up for the next yin posture, which will be dragonfly pose with lateral bends on either side. So we'll kind of do 2 rounds of dragonfly with a lateral bend. I'm going to use a bolster and a block here. So I'm using the bolster to sit up on. So you'll sit with your legs extended out in front, and then you'll bring them out as wide as they go for you. If you're really, really flexible, this might mean you're almost in the middle splits here. This is as wide as my legs go for me today. In other words, you're going your width out with the legs here. So this is basically dragonfly legs, the yin name for it. And what we'll do is we'll do 2 rounds of this posture, but with a lateral bend added to each side of the torso. Twist and laterally bend the torso. This is where I'm going to find a block useful here. I'll explain what the block is for here. By the way, well, actually, let's get into one side of the lateral bend. I'll talk about modifications here. If this is really painful, make sure your knees can be soft, or you can bring your legs closer together. To start the lateral bend, maybe a little bit of expansion in the torso. So maybe a half of this energy gathering breath. Raise both hands up and feel like you're growing tall through your arms and your torso. Turn and face your left leg. And then laterally bend over the right leg. Maybe sweep the left arm up and over to kind of encourage the shape and the motion. But once your torso is kind of stopped here, then you can sweep the left arm behind your torso. And then this is basically the shape, this bent over shape, this lateral bend shaped in dragonfly here. This is where we'll stay. Now, if it feels okay to just let everything hang here, that's great. What I find is the head and the neck gets really, this gets really tedious for the neck. So this is what I use the block for. I place my elbow on the block, and then I can use my forearm to just rest my head on. And I still get the lateral bend in my torso, but now my neck gets a break. If you have a really strong neck, maybe you don't need that. Maybe you can just let it hang here. Sometimes that's what I do when I'm feeling my neck is feeling extra strong here. So we'll just stay here. Now for about 3 minutes per side of the lateral bend. So settled into your shape. Now dragonfly legs complete dragonfly legs doesn't quite work for you. One modification you can do is to bend the left knee, bring the left heel in, and do kind of a half butterfly version of this. And you can do that on the other side too. You can straighten this leg and bend this leg, and we'll do the other side of the lateral bend here. So that's one option to think about in this pose here. If you're not really liking dragonfly legs but want to do a lateral bend, you can also practice banana pose. If you know what banana pose is. I'm not going to demonstrate it here, but if you're familiar with banana pose, you can try that. Otherwise, we'll stay here for another couple of minutes. And we'll get back to this discussion, this idea of the Tropic of Cancer. So like I was mentioning earlier, if you've ever looked at a globe that had kind of some official lines on the globe, like marking, maybe the globe has the North Pole and the South Pole, it has the equator, and then there's these other special lines, latitude lines, that you see marked on the globe that maybe you've never quite known what they meant. There's the Arctic Circle, Antarctic and Arctic Circle lines, but there's also these other two latitude lines that are above and below the equator, known as the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. And they're there specifically to denote the area of the world that's known as the tropics. But astronomically speaking, the Tropic of Cancer is the northernmost latitude where the sun actually reaches directly overhead. And by directly, I'm going to introduce a word here called zenith. Zenith is, when you're standing on the ground, zenith is the point exactly above your head. So if you look straight up, that's zenith. On the Tropic of Cancer, which is at 23.5 degrees north latitude, on the June solstice, be it the summer solstice or the winter solstice if you live in the Southern Hemisphere, if you're on that latitude line anywhere on the Earth, then when the sun reaches its highest point, it will be at zenith. It will be directly overhead. And that is the significance of that latitude line. So if you're north of that, the sun never reaches directly overhead. If you're south of the Tropic of Capricorn, the sun never reaches directly overhead any time of the year. It's only in this range of those two tropics where the sun actually can be directly overhead. That's the significance of those two lines here. So we're done with this side here. You can use your arm, you can put your hand on the floor and use your arm to push your torso up if it's really achy. And if it's feeling too achy, maybe some twists or some little wiggles. Or even kind of a back bend. Reach your hands back, place them on the floor, and then reach your sternum up towards the ceiling to work out some. You might have to, maybe you need a break from dragonfly legs. So bring your legs out of dragonfly and maybe wobble them around a little bit. But I'm going to just go right into the other side of this dragonfly lateral bend, so I'm changing my block. Same procedure here. For a moment, I'm getting a little bit yang here. So I'm toning through my core, bringing my spine nice and feeling long, arms up overhead, and then I turn and face my right leg so that I can laterally bend my torso over my left leg. And you don't have to worry about how far it goes. For most of us in this posture, we go, that's just a tiny little bit. That's good enough. Here, that's your edge in you. And again, you can help with making the initial shape by maybe reaching that right arm up and over, but at some point maybe just allow the right arm to kind of droop back behind the torso. This is to kind of encourage the right shoulder to move up because I'm trying to do a lateral bend rather than a forward one. And again, you can let the head and neck hang and torso hang in midair, or if you want a little bit of a support, then use your block. By the way, remember you have different heights for your block here. So pick the one that fits you here. And then just stay here for a few minutes on this other side here. The fact that the Tropic of Cancer is at 23.5 degrees north latitude, and the Tropic of Capricorn is 23.5 degrees south latitude, is no mystery. It has to do with the tilt of the Earth's axis. So the tilt of the rotation axis of the Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees from the axis of Earth's orbit around the Sun. So as Earth orbits the Sun, the tilted axis creates the seasons, and it creates the effects like the solstices, like the equinox. And so that line, that latitude line, is directly related to the solstices. At least the Tropic of Cancer is related to the June solstice. That's why it's there. It's the northern point at which the sun arrives at zenith on the day of the June solstice here. So another minute and a half or so on this side of the lateral bend. Maybe you have to ease up. Always give yourself permission to come out of a posture. This is a very allowing and accepting practice, and if it's not, then it's probably not going to be too or terribly useful to you. And this is what defines the tropics. We talk about the word tropical, and we think of maybe lush rainforests or something near the equator that's very hot. And it's technically referring to this area of the world where at some point during the year the sun reaches directly overhead, directly at zenith. And the Tropic of Capricorn and Cancer are the extents of those. However, it might be interesting to know where that line got its name. Why is it called the Tropic of Cancer? So about 5 more breaths here on this side. Well, as the Earth orbits the sun appears to pass through different groups of background stars. And the stars are broken up and down into constellations, and the 12 constellations that the sun passes through in any given year is known as the zodiac. So I would say probably most people are familiar with the zodiac, simply because when we're born, at some point we get interested in what our zodiac sign is, and that is related to a constellation of the zodiac. That's the idea. One more breath here. We're coming out here. So plant your hand on the ground. Maybe use your arm again to help your torso. Bring your torso back up. And then you can slowly, if you're still in dragonfly legs, we're finally done with dragonfly legs. You can slowly bring your legs out of this posture. Any kind of little movements might be nice, so you can point and flex your feet a few times, maybe wiggle your legs. I'm going to suggest waterfall as a counterpose for this. And so for waterfall, you'll just make your way onto your back. Waterfall is legs up the wall pose without the wall. So you make your way onto your back. Maybe give your knees a nice hug here for a moment, and then extend your legs up towards the ceiling. Hands can, if you can reach, you can wrap your hands around the backs of your thighs just to kind of stabilize everything here. And you can point and flex your feet a few times. But it just might feel good to have a nice neutral spine here on the floor. And then kind of shake out any kind of reverberations from the dragonfly legs. Our next yin posture is happy baby pose. So you can start out by just giving your knees a nice hug. Maybe this is your version of happy baby today here. Otherwise, knees kind of ooze out on either side of your rib cage, and then you can reach up in between your legs with your hands and either clasp onto your shins, your ankles, or the bottoms of your feet. And then try to point the bottoms of your feet up towards, have the face up towards the ceiling. And then just soften everything. Let your knees kind of ooze towards the ground. This is about as far as my knees are going to ooze here. So this is my version of happy baby. This is the yin version. So we'll kind of just stay still here and let the muscles be soft. Now the arms can be yang if you want them to be yang. In other words, you can pull down on your feet and your lower legs as much as you want to. It's not much yin for the upper body. It's kind of a yang workout. As long as you're trying to stay soft in the lower body. This is obviously hip opener here. So we're trying to stay soft in the hips and the legs here. We'll just stay here for 3 minutes or so here. Just notice your breath here. So if you're fine in happy baby, stay here. For some of us, maybe happy baby doesn't work. Option I'm going to give here is just child's pose here. So for child's pose, you slowly come out of happy baby, roll over to one side, and then get onto hands and knees and then the hips back towards your heels. Lower your torso, lower your arms. Arms can be forward, arms can be back. Knees can be together, knees can be wide enough so that your torso fits in between them. So your version of child's pose as an alternative for happy baby pose. Happy baby can get pretty intense. It's a pretty direct hip opener. So for some of us, maybe we're done with this after a minute or 2 minutes, but I'm going to try to stay here for 3 or so. So just notice again, like at the very beginning of practice, where you're just trying to notice the present moment. Notice the present moment, notice the textures and the sensations, the pressures, the mental and the emotional qualities of the posture. You're trying to get to know the latitude lines, the tropics of your body and your being here. Just like the topic for class is, the topic for this practice is just cultivating a little bit of awareness for the earth and its journey around the sun, particularly these points like on the solstices. So the solstice, the word solstice actually means to stand still, because on the June or December solstice, the sun kind of slows down and stops in its apparent northerly or southerly daily motions here. And it stops, it pauses for a few days, and then it switches directions and goes the other way. That's basically the meaning of the word solstice, is to stand still. And the tropics, the latitude line on the earth sort of define this motion. In fact, the word tropic is from a Greek word, which means to change direction. That's where the word tropics and tropical actually comes from. It means the zone in which the sun moves and changes direction and goes the other way, and then moves and changes directions and comes back. So that's the ancient Greek meaning of the word tropic and tropical. So that's part of the name of this Tropic of Cancer here. So just one more breath here in happy baby. Maybe you're glad to be done with this pose, so you can go ahead and release it, and you can kind of wiggle. You can bring your knees into your chest. You can do kind of point and flex here in waterfall or so. Gently roll over to one side, bring yourself up. We'll set up for the next yin posture, which is another hip opener known as sleeping swan. That's the yin name. Kind of a more common name for this shape is called pigeon pose. But we're doing the yin version of this in that we're staying for a while. So come to hands and knees, and then bring your left foot up in between your hands, and maybe inch the right leg, the right knee back a few inches. And then walk your left leg over to the right side of your mat. Lower the left knee and lower your hips. Now you might have to adjust your heel depending on what your knee and what your hips think about this here. So this is the beginning of Sleeping Swan. This is called Swan pose. And if your hips are way off the ground and that's creating strain, put a prop underneath your hips or your thighs to support it. I grabbed the block because that's the closest thing to me. If you have a bolster, the bolster is probably more comfy to place underneath here. If you want more oomph in Sleeping Swan, move the heel away from the hip until you feel enough pressure here. You can do a little bit of a back bend here in Swan, and then slowly begin to just move your torso forward as far as it goes until it stops. Do this slowly so that you find a good stopping point. You find an appropriate edge here. And then we'll stay here, Sleeping Swan, for a few minutes or so. Get in touch with your breath. Get in touch with the pressures and the stresses and the tractions and the sensation. Don't forget about your mental and emotional processes. This is a gestaltic, holistic kind of practice here. Everything gets to be considered, and everything is okay. You're allowed to have kind of whatever emotions you're having. You're allowed to have whatever kind of mental state that you're having right now. That's part of the practice, is to just notice everything here. You can stay here in Sleeping Swan. If you're finding that this is traumatic, desperate, and injurious to do this, then an alternative is to slowly make your way onto your back. You can try eye of the needle instead. So when you get to your back, bend your knees. Place the right foot on the floor. Take the left heel, place it on the right thigh, left knee's out wide. This is stage number 1 for eye of the needle. If you feel a lot here, you can stay here. Stage number 2 is draw the right leg in, and then clasp the right leg with your hand, either behind the thigh or in front of the shin. Whatever's more convenient, more comfortable for you here. And this hip opener has similar properties to pigeon or Sleeping Swan, so it's a nice alternative if that other pose just doesn't work for your body. Remember, there's nothing wrong with your body. If your body's having issues with the pose, there's something wrong with the pose here. If you're kind of doing some metaphorical math about this tropical zone. So the equator. So here's a pop quiz. You can maybe already have calculated and guessed what days of the year that the sun appears at zenith at the equator. And the sun appears directly overhead at the equator on the equinoxes. So again, all of a sudden these words are becoming very related here. But back to the zodiac. So the sun, because of the Earth's traveling around the sun, from our perspective, standing on Earth, it appears that to us that the sun seems to be moving against this backdrop of stars, and when it's inside a particular grouping of stars, a particular constellation, we say the sun is in that constellation, and it visits and lives in the 12 constellations of the zodiac. One more breath here, and then we're coming out of Sleeping Swan. You can come back up into Swan, this little back bend here, and then slowly make your way out. come to seated. And I always like windshield wiper legs for a counter pose here. So from seated, bend your knees, put your feet on the floor fairly wide apart to get a better internal rotation here, and then very gently lower both knees to one side, bring them back up, dip them over to the other side, and then do this as slowly or as quickly as you would like to do, and as many cycles as you want to do. And then we'll set up for the next other side of that hip opener. So maybe it's the other side of eye of the needle for you. Otherwise, we'll set up for this side of, other side of sleeping swan. So hands and knees, and then the right foot comes up, the other foot. And then maybe inch the other knee back. You can always put lots of padding under that back leg if you need to. Start working the right foot over to the left. Slowly begin to lower everything. And you might have to adjust this ankle to account. The placement of this ankle closer to the hips maybe helps mitigate any knee issues here. By the way, this is a hip opener, not a knee opener. So any kind of painful torquing in the knee is not supposed to be part of the experience of this posture here. You can put props underneath your hip. You can do a slight back bend, swan here, and then slowly come to your version of sleeping swan. You can stay up on straight arms, forearms, make it all the way down onto the ground here. Or maybe stuff a prop, like a bolster, underneath your torso. And here we'll stay for another 3 minutes or so. So just sink in, and once again check in with how this side feels. Notice any differences between this zone, this latitude, and the other latitude of the other side here. So the Tropic of Cancer is so named. So one of the zodiac of constellation is the constellation of Cancer. That's where the word Cancer comes from. It's from the Cancer, the crab, the zodiac constellation. And a few thousand years ago, when these zones on the Earth were actually named, the summer solstice occurred when the sun seemed to reside in the constellation Cancer, the crab, the zodiac constellation. And that's how you arrive at the name, the Tropic of Cancer. It has to do with this idea of this is where the sun changes direction. That's in the word tropic. And the word Cancer is referring to the zodiac constellation that the sun resided in on the June solstice in a few thousand years ago. Now the Earth wobbles on its axis, and therefore the constellation that the sun resides in on the solstice changes. The wobble tends to last about 26,000 years. So it turns out that the sun is no longer in Cancer, in the constellation Cancer, at least from our perspective, on the June solstice. I want to say summer solstice, but if you live in the Southern Hemisphere, then the June solstice is the winter solstice here. About 1 more minute left here. Again, you can come out of your posture early if you need to. You can also stay longer. Just ignore me if I'm going off into a new posture here. But about 5 more breaths here on this, in your version of this hip opener, this side of sleeping swan here. It was in Cancer when it was named, when that latitude line was named about a little more than 2,000 years ago. For the past couple of millennia, past couple of thousand years, the sun has actually resided in the constellation Gemini during during the summer solstice. But just recently, not just kind of currently now, the sun is actually moving out of even Gemini and now resides in the constellation Taurus, the zodiac constellation Taurus, the bull. So when the sun on the summer solstice, no longer in the constellation Cancer, it's in the constellation Taurus due to the wobble of the Earth's axis, which is another term for it is the precession of the equinoxes. But of course the solstices also precess with the equinoxes. So we're coming out of this side of sleeping Swan. Can come back up into Swan. And then slowly make your way out, deliberately, gently. And again, whatever kind of counter maneuver your body is wanting. Again, I'm going to recommend this windshield wiper maneuver here. But maybe there's something else that your body is craving here. And then we'll move into the last again, long-held yin posture, which will be just another round of Sphinx pose. It's this general back bend here. So make your way onto your belly. Legs again comfortably extended out behind you. Elbows underneath your shoulders. Find your version of Sphinx again. And then just spend some time here in Sphinx again for another few minutes. Now if you're somebody here who you don't really feel much in Sphinx and you want something a little bit more intense, since we're doing this the second time, then I would say you can try Seal. And Seal is where you take your hands, kind of place them, maybe to start out just a little bit in front of your shoulders. Fingers pointed slightly out towards the side. And then press yourself up. Completely extend your arms and lock your elbows off. So that, again, you're transmitting your torso weight through your arm bones and not so much through your arm muscles here. So this is Seal pose. And for almost everybody, this is a much more intense back bend here. You might be able to hold your head back, get a nice stretch through the throat, or you can just hang your head forward here in Seal. If this is intense and you can only hold it for like maybe 30 seconds or a minute, do that. And when you're done with Seal, invite yourself back down into just normal Sphinx here for the remainder of the time, or come out completely here. So get settled. And then just notice here again. So we're finally coming around to sort of the title of this practice, in that if we were to mark the north and south latitude lines of the solstice lines, where the sun appears directly overhead today, they wouldn't be called. The north one would not be called the Tropic of Cancer. It would actually get called the Tropic of Taurus. And I guess I can mention here now that the Tropic of Capricorn wouldn't be the Tropic of Capricorn. It would actually be named the Tropic of Sagittarius. Thus the changing nature over thousands of years has made some of our basic labels outdated and outmoded. But that is where where this obscure name Tropic of Cancer actually comes from. It's actually the Tropic of Taurus in this day and age, just a few thousand years later here. So about 4 more breaths here in Sphinx. Then when you're Slowly bring yourself out. Again, you can just rest your head on your hands, or you can slowly make your way back into your favorite version of child's pose as a counter pose here. Just going to stay here for a couple of breaths. And then a little bit of integration before we move into a resting pose. So maybe a spine twist here. So make your way slowly onto your back. Bend your knees, draw them into your chest, give them a nice hug. And then take both knees and guide them over to the left with your left hand here. Right arm goes out right, just to create a twist here. If it's okay with your head and your neck, you can look right, which is opposite your knees. And just stay here for 2 or 3 breaths on this side. And then slowly bring your knees back up to center, going over to the other side. So maybe you can use your right hand to help guide the knees over to the right. Left arm extends over to the left, and you can look left with your head and your neck if that's okay. And then reside here. Maybe feel the twist. Maybe feel your breath, how your breath feels when your torso and your spine is twisted here. And then slowly bring your knees back up to center. There's a little bit of free-form yoga now. Any kind of wiggling postures or exercises you would like to do to work out any kind of imbalances or kinks. And then make your way into your version of resting pose, your favorite restorative postures. So use as many or as few props as you would like. You can place bolster underneath your... We're going to just do traditional Shavasana here, where I'm just lying on the floor, arms and legs extended and far enough away from each other so they have space. Maybe the palms can face up towards the ceiling. Your feet need to flop a little bit here. Maybe you decide you do need some kind of, maybe you need clothing or blankets if you're chilly. Maybe you need a pillow underneath your head. Maybe you do need a bolster underneath your knees here. Or maybe you decide you'd rather practice legs up the wall or reclined butterfly. Sit and guided in kind of a meditation seat. Whatever creates a sense of stillness and comfort here for these final moments of this practice. So this is where you still cultivate attention and focus. I always like to start with my head. I do a lot of overthinking, and that creates a lot of physical tension in my head and my face. So notice your jaw and the inside of your mouth. Maybe soften the jaw, your jaw and your tongue. Soften the insides of your cheeks. Soften your teeth. Soften your lips and the skin around the outside of your mouth. Soften the skin around your ears, your nose. Allow the muscles, your eye sockets to relax and release. Soften your forehead and your temples, the very crown of your head. Allow your thoughts to be fuzzy, free-floating. Soften down through your collarbones, the backs of your shoulder blades. Soften your right arm, right palm, and right fingers. Left arm, left palm, and left fingers. Relax down through your rib cage, your abdomen. Soften through your hips and thighs and knees. Tops and bottoms of your calves, ankles, heels, soles, and tops of your feet. And soften all the way down through the tips of your toes on both feet. Release, relax, and surrender your body-mind 100%. And then just notice your inner latitude, your inner solstice for the next few breaths. At some point, bring yourself back. And begin to deepen your breath. Maybe start to make little movements with fingers, with toes. Expand that motion into hands, to feet, the arms, and into legs. At some point, gently bend your knees and roll over onto one side. When you get there, pause for a moment. Cultivate a profound sense of gratitude for your efforts and practice, but also a deep sense of gratitude for you, your unique manifestation in this universe. The universe is ecstatically joyful that you are here. And at some point, just make yourself up to a comfortable, stable seat. When you get there, bring your hands together in front of your heart. And I'll end this practice with an Om. The inner sunlight in me honors the inner sunlight in you. Namaste.